Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. We're about to do it again, guys. Dear P Diddy, also known as Sean Combs, but professionally known as the rapper P Diddy. I never thought that I would be doing a video on my channel in which I philosophize about political and social issues about P Diddy. I haven't really heard from P Diddy since the early 2000s when I was just a little young lad, where I was exposed to music like I Want to See Your Body Go Bum Bum Bum, which P Diddy had a role in making. I had no clue that I would be making this kind of video, but alas, here we are. And the reason I'm making this video, this sort of open letter to you, P Diddy, is because I saw your letter to corporate America that you posted yesterday on Thursday of April 8th, and there are so many things going through my mind. You know, when you were in the news, I thought that you had released Bad Boys Part 5 or something, that you were doing something that was a little bit more in the lane of artistry. But you artistically crafted one of the most rhetorically deceptive letters that I have ever laid my eyes on. Something that is meant to solely tug at the heartstrings and not the mind. An act of pathos, almost, rather than an act of logos. And of course, there's always a room, Mr. Diddy, or Mr. Combs, I should probably say, because Diddy sounds weird. There's always room for the pathos. There's always room for pathos. But that shouldn't be the driving point of your message if you want to actually convince people and exhort people towards accepting a certain proposition. And in your letter, which is displayed here on Revolt TV, in your letter, you basically say, the tagline says, no longer can corporate America manipulate our culture into believing progress, incremental progress, is acceptable action. So your claim here, Sean, is basically that corporate America is undermining the black community because it does not invest enough in black-owned businesses and black-owned media. And you particularly attack General Motors for making billions of dollars, but only giving a very small share of all of their resources towards black-owned media companies. Now, what you do when you make this claim, my friend, and this is one claim in a whole variety of claims in your letter that are absolutely just ridiculous. What you do is that you essentialize race as an investing strategy. But race, my friend, is not an investing strategy. Investing strategies are not susceptible to the sort of throes of racialism. They are not susceptible to the throes of race ideology. Investing strategy is actually entirely beholden to the laws of economics. And the laws of economics are nothing more than an extension of the laws of this universe, just on a much more smaller and micro scale. So guess what, Mr. Diddy? You cannot simply change the laws of economics because you have this sort of perverse incentive to essentialize race into everything. That's number one. Number two, you are assuming that because black-owned businesses get less money, that the black community is being undervalued. When you yourself in your letter mention and admit that a lot of GM's customers are black and they give them money. Why do you think this is the case? Maybe it's because those customers don't necessarily care about their race. They care about being able to purchase products that are good, valuable, and are reliable. Perhaps the essentialization of race that you have put over this entire thing, Sean, is not necessarily pertinent to these people you claim to represent. It's always the intellectuals or the pseudo-intellectuals that try to presume as if they have the interests of the people at hand and then try to take those interests and shove them down people's throats without actually investigating if the people have those interests or not. There's a bigger problem here, though. And I will quote from your letter, Sean. You say that corporations like General Motors have exploited our culture, undermined our power, and excluded black entrepreneurs from participating in the value created by black consumers. Is that so? Well, there's a few things with this. Well, number one, you have not explained how they exploited our culture. Number two, you've not explained how they have undermined our power. And number three, hidden in your presumptions here is this idea that we have collective power and collective culture. Culture is a multivariate individual thing with so many nooks and crannies that you cannot intellectually honestly say that culture is this single mass. That is a false understanding of culture. And power is an individual thing as well. But I guess in your paradigm, power is a system, right? Power is a system, and so you're treating it as if it's a system. But it's not a system. There is no black power. There is no white power. There is simply power, and every individual has a little bit of power in their life, and some individuals have more given their social hierarchy. But there's no such thing of black power in the abstraction that you characterize it as. So your sentiments are founded upon false abstractions which do nothing more but give legitimacy to a creed which destroys the black individual, the very same people you claim to want to help. You continue on with your statistical reasoning. You say brands spent $239 billion on advertising. Less than 1% of that was invested in black-owned media companies. Out of the roughly $3 billion that General Motors spent on advertising, we estimate that only $10 million, was invested in black-owned media. Only $10 million out of $3 billion. Like the rest of corporate America, GM is telling us to sit down, shut up, and be happy with what we get. Again, this is bad reasoning. He's basically claiming that African Americans are hurting because we're not getting more money. African American businesses are hurting because we're not getting more money. But my friend, the laws of logic would say this is a false claim. The lack of a positive, not a negative. So just because I'm not giving you something does not mean I'm taking something away from you. That does not mean the same thing. That those are two very different things. Just logically, this absolutely makes no sense. But again, he's trying to conceptualize the importance of these businesses on the basis that they are black-owned. But Sean, just because a business is black-owned does not mean it's a good business. It does not mean that it's a profitable business. There are so many different factors that could go into the funding of black-owned companies that have nothing to do with their race, but you continue to essentialize that as if it is the dominant fact of reality. Another fallacy. But you also put the existential destiny of African American entrepreneurs not in their own creative energy, not in their own pursuit of happiness, not in their own ability to do things. You put the existential destiny of African Americans into the hands of corporate America. Well, in all reality, again, that's a falsehood. Because the black businesses exist in the first place because someone had an idea and wanted to pursue the idea with their creative energy. That's where it begins. That's where it must end. You should stop trying to suspend the destinies of business owners towards the corporate world because that is not whose hands it rests in. We have the power. Christ came with all power in his hands. Then when he died, this is just a theological point, not necessarily a religious one. When he died, it said that he gave that power transferred over to us in the emission of grace. And so just archetypally, the God who came down to the world, died, gave the power to us in his hands, and now we have the power that the Godhood had in our hands. Now, of course, this is not a religious point. You can be a Christian, you cannot be a Christian and support this point as well. The point is, there are so many conceptual metaphors in our society that signify the amount of power that we as individuals have in our hands, that to ignore that and to pretend as if we are suspended in a state of stasis dependent on some bigwig in a boardroom is to endeavor in a falsehood. You also say that it is disrespectful that black media companies are not being funded as much as others. But that implies that they have an obligation to give us money simply because of our race. First of all, you are obligated to nothing. The only thing you are obligated to is for your rights not to be interfered with. There is no obligation for someone to take their resources and give it to you. Only if there is a voluntary compact or a contract. And you are presuming as if those things are assumed by the fact that black consumers give certain businesses money. But that makes no sense because black consumers are not acting as quote-unquote black consumers. They're acting as consumers. Again, when you essentialize race in everything, you see race in everything, Sean. But also, finally, you're assuming that more money means more progress. No matter how much money you throw at a project, if that project is not sound in and of itself, no amount of money can save it. So, P Diddy, Sean Combs, whatever, I would encourage you to actually evaluate the logical and philosophical consistency of your claims before going out and presuming that every corporation in this country has a responsibility to you or to black people off of these vague, abstract qualities which have nothing to do with the very real laws that regulate and inform consumership. Think on it. As always, my friends, I love you, and please stay pensive. Wait, before you go, Be sure to donate to me on Patreon, patreon.com/officialcwatson. But until then, my friends, be pensive. Bye-bye.